George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. James Braxton Peterson, or Dr. James Peterson, who earned his PhD from the University of Penn. So we want you to know he's an Ivy Leaguer in
Oh,
the
here we
house.
go. Good morning, sir. Good morning. It's good to see you again, good brother. How you been?
Very good, very good. So one of the keynotes for the Dream Summit, we've been telling you about it, August 27th and 28th here in the Cuse, but the panel discussions are going to be on the 27th. And so Dr. James Peterson is in the house. And we realized that we had connected before on some of his earlier works around hip hop and hip hop culture. And so glad that you could be a part of it. The Dream Summit, of course, is presented by Eli Smith, and we're in partnership, and they're a partner with Inspiration for the Nation to bring these very talented people to the Cuse. So talk to me about your involvement in the Dream Summit.
Well, so the Dream Summit, as you noted, is the brainchild and really the baby of Eli Smith and his team. And I think the vision for it is that, you know, we really need to be able to celebrate, platform, and uplift our culture everywhere. Obviously in Syracuse and in the surrounding region, but I feel like for Eli Smith, he's seen that need because he's been an entrepreneur in the space, and you know, it's one thing to sort of make money and do development and do different things in the community, and another thing to see a need, right? And so the Dream Summit is trying to address that need of bringing people together, celebrating Black culture, celebrating achievement and accomplishment, and really a vision for thinking how we move forward. And so I'm just a baby keynote this year. Like, really, I'm just a baby. I mean, there's some big names here that are going to be on this marquee. I don't want to spoil it, but
Oh no, we're gonna spoil it. So Soledad O'Brien, yes,
Soledad O'Brien,
Jamel Hill,
the extraordinary Dr. Reverend Freddie Haynes is going to be here, and a bunch of people. I don't even know. I can't even recall the full lineup off the top of my head.
Right.
But it's really it's going to be a very dramatic and powerful program.
Wait, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out our very own Super Bowl champion, Dorsey Levens.
Dorsey Levens, of course. And for those folks who have been to Dream Summits in the past, they'll come this year and see that Eli Smith and his team have elevated this event to the next level, right? Yeah. They're obviously, the vision for Dream Summit is for it to be a national event with international recognition. And this year's iteration of the event, I think, reflects that growth for the folks like yourself and the other stakeholders and collaborators with Eli Smith on this important work. So I'm just a baby keynote in that big lineup on August 27th and 28th.
Yeah, you call yourself a baby keynote, but your work isn't baby keynote work, right? I mean, you've been out here, as they say, on these streets doing real work, and part of your research has been around hip hop and hip hop culture, and I've been thinking about hip hop a lot lately, being from the boogie down where it all started, living on the street, not that street. Well, my mom, you know, our last street was Cedric Avenue, where hip hop is said to have been born.
It was born on Cedric Ave. It was
Cedric Avenue in the Bronx, right?
That's right.
So, and I lived on Cedric Avenue. My mom lived there for over 40 years.
Wow.
And a little farther up from where that building is. But I remember Kool Herc back in the day. And so y'all don't know nothing about DJ Hollywood back in the day, but
Hollywood is a little bit before Kool Herc was following Hollywood, right?
Right. And I used to go to this place. I used to go to this club 371. I was a student at Syracuse. Whenever I came home for a break, we used to hit this club in the Bronx called 371. And you would hear, you know, it was just great. Hollywood and, of course, all these other folks. But and so look at where we've come, right? With hip hop and hip hop culture. Where would you say we are in terms of that?
So as always with hip hop, we're kind of always at a new inflection point, right?
Okay.
And I've been having a lot of complicated conversations around the culture and where it is right now. You know, on the one hand, you know, you have like Kendrick Lamar just dropped another classic album, a very substantive and thoughtful album that's therapeutic, and it's about therapy and about the Black experience in a really complicated way. And then on the other hand, you know, you got other artists doing drill music and making music that for most people outside the culture looks like it's just a reflection of the violence and misogyny of our community. And so I think it's hard for people to appreciate the ways in which the culture has always presented those conflicts for us. The culture has always presented that range of whatever you think of as negative and pathological, or versus whatever you think is constructive and edifying. Like, the culture has always been varied, and always within the culture has always sort of been built in the antidotes for everything that ails it. Right. So if you think the music is violent, or you see images that are misogynistic or materialistic, there are artists who made rhymes critiquing that. Right. There are artisans within the culture who make art that challenges that. And so I think that the inflection point always for me with hip hop is to be mindful of the ways in which it is large and it contains multitudes, as Walt Whitman says. So I think folks are troubled when they look at how social media has changed the music a little bit. And again, I don't want to beat up on drill music, but drill music has come under fire a lot because it's been so closely tied to some of the violence in the streets of our inner cities.
Yeah.
And it's reflective of that. But again, what I say to folks, and this is not to be sarcastic, but literally, like, you could erase or get rid of whatever rapper, Little Baby, Young Who, whatever, Young Little, whoever you want to get rid of. There'd be 1,000 other dudes ready to step in and rap about the exact same thing. And so unless and until we change the conditions that those artists are rapping about, it's gonna be very, very difficult to remove those elements from the music. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't push back, critique, challenge. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold up women artists, support artists who are doing more conscious work, right? Like, there's things that we can do in the meanwhile, but we shouldn't mistake the symptom for the disease when it comes to hip hop, right? Like, yes, violence is prevalent in our communities. Yes, the homicide rates are out of control, right? Gun violence, the erosion of public education, those things are real in our communities, but those are the structural things that need to be addressed. The rappers rapping about it are symptomatic of that. And so I always challenge folks to think about that when we get into these conversations about the culture.
Well, you just said a whole lot for me to just ask you about. James Peterson, Dr. James Peterson.
You asked, bro. I can talk about that forever.
Well, I got 29 questions, but let me start with you. You make the point, and he's one of our panelists, one of the panelists on the Dream Summit, August 27th. Get your tickets, mydreamsummit.com. You threw out a lot there in terms of what music is, and you mentioned drill music. Now, our audience, as hip as they are, they don't know what that is. And Eric, I remember Eric Adams was talking about this in terms of his own family, Mayor Eric Adams in New York. So drill music, what is it?
So I thank you for saying that, because I as a scholar, but someone who's also has like working class roots, I never want to use language or terms or jargon that folks don't have access to. And so the best way for me to describe drill music is it is a style of rap music that emerged out of Chicago, and that really is threaded and integrated through Chicago underground culture and Chicago gang culture. A poor analogy is to think of it as what gangster rap was in the late 80s, early 90s, coming out of LA and Compton, right? Drill music is to Chicago. I say it's a poor analogy because it's not a exact one-to-one, but for folks who need a touchstone to understand it, that's the best way to understand it. But the challenge around drill music is that it is also infiltrated by the use of social media, right? And so there is a lot of overlap between what's being talked about on social media, what's being talked about in some of the lyrics of drill music, and what's happening in the streets. This is why you're starting to see more and more, even though this has been going on for a long time, you're starting to see more and more of these federal cases where federal prosecutors are using social media content and rap lyrics as evidentiary information in their prosecutions. And so
And the reason why they're doing that is because people are confessing in these songs, and sometimes, or allegedly confessing in these songs.
Confessing. Although what I would argue is that we have to be very careful, right? Because even if there may be some confessions or some point-to-point reality song stuff, it's still a creative enterprise, and I think the government is oftentimes remiss in using rap lyrics as evidence in these cases. I feel like they need to be a little bit more forensic and a little bit more traditional in terms of how they prosecute these crimes. It's a little bit lazy from my perspective to use
Right.
rap lyrics and social media
And
posts in that
and
way.
and thank you for checking me on that, because we don't want to create a system that already has all different ways to systemically be racist towards Black folk in their creative endeavors.
Brother
So,
Kilpatrick, now see, now the first you talk about hip hop, now you want to talk about mass incarceration. I will be on your show all day, right? But you're right. We're already dealing with a lot of structural challenges and racial disparities that have persisted within the mass incarceration policies of the United States for decades upon decades, right? Since the passing of the 13th Amendment, right? So to add a layer of removing free speech from artists, using lyrics and social media posts as evidentiary in federal prosecutions is another layer that will exacerbate the racial disparities that already exist in our criminal legal system.
you also mentioned hip hop and the complexities of hip hop culture, and one of the things you talked about was so artists, right? And you have this artist over here, and let's position or speak about women in the movement today, right? And speaking of who was it, Cardi B and Meg the Stallion, when they did their piece and all the brothers was coming, why are they saying that? Why are they talking about that when they did the song WAP, right? And so um how do you how do we see women and how they are saying who they are? You got what, Lil Kim and um others. Talk to me.
Yeah, so some of your male listeners are gonna maybe not not feel me too much on this because so I'm not intimidated or like disgusted or offended by WAP, right?
Right, right,
Um, Black women have been celebrating sexuality in explicit ways since Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, right? Since Bessie Smith, right? So this
right,
is not really new. That's number one. Number two, there is an element of liberation that now it doesn't mean that I want 6 and 7 year old children to necessarily listen to that, right? That's a different conversation that we can have.
right,
Same time, I don't want to censor anybody, right? But there has to be space within pop culture for women to celebrate a sex positive kind of feminism, right?
right, right.
I think that falls in it. Now, people can feel free to disagree with me on that, but I'll challenge them and say, hey, what's the last Rhapsody record that you bought? Right? What's the last Nitty Scott record that you bought? Right? How many times have you gone to see a Lauryn Hill concert? Right. So like maybe you don't like what Megan Thee Stallion is doing, what Cardi B is doing, or what Little Kim and Foxy Brown did before them. Maybe that style of music is not to your liking, right? But are you supporting the women artists who are doing the kind of music that should be to your liking if your critique is that this is too sexually explicit? Because there's, again, Rhapsody released a classic record. I think it was called Eve, a classic record all about Black women, right? Each track celebrating a different Black woman. But I didn't see the same people who were talking about WAP talking about that record from Rhapsody when it came out. I don't see the same people talking about what's everything wrong with Megan Thee Stallion saying, hey, we listen to Nitty Scott as well, right? So like I said, the culture itself presents you with a lot of times the antidote to what you think is alien the culture. The question is, are you actively checking for it and listening to it?
Yeah, that is the question. Dr. James Peterson, one of the panelists, keynotes. I say panelists, one of the keynote speakers. Although he says he's going to be doing a baby keynote,
baby keynote,
at the Dream Summit, August 27th and 28th, mydreamsummit.com, presented by Eli Smith. We're really excited to see you coming. And I guess the couple more things in this hip hop. It just set me because I'm fascinated about it. So let's talk about Drake and Beyonce, right? Now, Beyonce is not hip hop, or is she? And Drake is, right? I mean, Beyonce, I guess, beyond hip hop, if you will, but still plays.
I don't argue beyond pop culture itself, but yeah,
right. So should she be even in the conversation? But both of them did something very interesting recently. It was and you can take it any way you want. Drake released a more of a dance type album, and then Beyonce is giving me house. I'm here for it. Here for it.
So I would argue that Drake's album is kind of in that house space as well. And I think what's happening is that, and this this happens cyclically within the culture, right? There's sort of there's like a flight towards nostalgia. There's always a pull towards nostalgia with hip hop because in its origins, hip hop culture was about repurposing Black music and Black items and Black culture to make this new thing, right? So
Right.
there's always a pull, there's always a push pull. The push is towards like technological advancement. How do we do whatever's the newest, coolest tech thing?
Right.
That's why hip hop drove pagers and cell phones and all that, right? Two-way pages and all that stuff. Hip hop embraced all that stuff first, right? But the pull is towards a sort of nostalgia. And so you're seeing a house music aesthetic not creep, but like full on blast into the production of our most popular artists because those artists, even though they're younger than we are, Brother Kilpatrick, they're younger than we are, but they've been in homes and been in spaces where
Right.
older siblings, older cousins, and for Drake, maybe even his parents' generation,
Right.
was
Right.
listening to house music and moving to it, and so they know what it is. And I think what's complicated about house music a lot of times, what's really complicated about hip hop, which is it was very easy for house music to kind of get appropriated and pulled out of like those Jersey, New York club spaces and sort of commercialized and diluted, so to speak. And so there's always a fight for authenticity with house music, right? Like Chicago house is like, yo, our house music is more authentic than your house music, right? So there's always been those battles, and that's what makes it sticky, right? And what makes it compelling for folks generation after generation. So I'm actually not surprised to see house music make a comeback. What I'm surprised about is that you have two of the most popular artists in pop culture and in the
Yes.
history of pop culture,
Yes.
albums in the same summer that are embracing that house aesthetic. What does that mean? It means that there's some movement going on that we haven't seen, something
Yeah.
bubbling beneath the surface for maybe 6 months, a year or so, where folks in these studios are thinking about this music and really starting to feel it. Folks in the clubs are starting to feel it, and boom, this is where you bring it back. I think some great things will come from it, honestly.
All right. A little inside baseball. What about this beef with Khalees?
Right.
And be-
And I think,
so let me
remember,
just give a context to
yeah,
that.
give the context for that. Yes.
So Khalees,
Beyonce used,
Beyonce sampled a
yep.
song, but that and gave Khalees a writing credit, and Khalees was like, "Well, wait a minute, you didn't ask me about that." But what I understand happened was she wasn't getting paid for that song, and so Beyonce, by giving her writing credit, was ensuring that she would then get future royalties. But that's not how it went down.
No, so there's so many ironies here. So yes, you got it right. Beyonce used Khalees's voice sample from her song for a new song on Renaissance. And she did not have to get clearance or permission from Khalees because Pharrell owned the rights to the song. Now, Pharrell had done what's probably a pretty typical music business deal, but it's a dirty deal where he essentially did not give her rights to the song that she created. Those things are always more complicated than they seem. But I think what Khalees is really arguing for is a different level of ethics within this kind of conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
Beyonce didn't have to clear it with her. And yes, it is the right gesture Beyonce's making. Khalees is asking for another layer of ethics, which is just reach out and talk to me about it. Like that's the courtesy she's asking
Right.
for.
Right.
She's not broke or poor, right? But she
Right.
probably could make more money off her music than she did if she didn't have some of these crazy deals. And so I think that I love the conversation in this sense that people can learn about like
The
sometimes how
business.
deals are structured are really crazy. And like Beyonce tried to do her intentions were good, but Khalees is just like, there are some artists who have a chip on their shoulder about what to what degree they get their respect or respect due. And sometimes that doesn't have anything to do with money or royalties. For Khalees, it didn't have to do with that. For her, it's like, oh, you put out the biggest album since you put out an album last time. Every time you put out an album, it's the biggest album since the last time. The least you could do is reach out to me and just say, hey, we know we don't need to clearance from you, but we're using this. I want to put your name in, blah, blah, blah. And then as it turns out, she gets removed from the record. It's a nightmare, right?
Because nightmare.
we should have been able to get to a better resolution, but Khalees took it to social media because she probably felt like that was her best chance of being heard.
So many things to get to you about. You also have success tips. You train leaders. And so give us a tease about, so let's talk about that. How do you train leaders? how do you make train leaders, or how do you help us to think about how we can be successful as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as people just wanting to uplift and upgrade our lives, to dream? Ah.
Right. I mean, part of my remarks are going to be speaking specifically to this in my baby keynote, which is, dreams still matter.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world, although there have been some great wins over the last week for this world, but we live in a world sometimes where hope is diminished. We live in a world where hate is sort of readily apparent and celebrated. We live in a world where not enough people care about our elderly, not enough people care about climate change, not enough people care about economic inequality, and sometimes in the face of all that, we lose sight of what our dreams are. Now, part of what I do for my clients, as I've been out of the academy for a while, is I work with them to make their organizations thrive. And a lot of times what that means is being more equitable, right? More inclusive, including the different voices at the table, and challenging ourselves to center those kinds of principles in our everyday work. And so I'm not like Reverend Haynes, the leader of a mega church, or Soledad O'Brien, who's the captain of an extraordinary media company. But I love them as Dream Summit speakers, right? Because or Dorsey Levens, right? Because they were leaders in these different spaces. And one thing that the folks who attend the Dream Summit will come to understand is that there is some commonality across all those different things, across media, sports, culture. There are some common themes that you can find amongst those leaders. They're transparent, they're inclusive, they're committed to equity, right? And Eli Smith is a great sort of story about this, because his success in a lot of ways is about his stick-to-itiveness, his determination, but also once he got it, he kind of understood that being inclusive and centering equity in terms of his work practices was going to help him to go a long way. And so I'm going to be thinking with our audience a little bit about how do we sort of embrace dreams, our own personal dreams, our community's dreams, our family's dreams, as a way to think forward and to be able to move through the malaise of hatred and inequality that still persists in our society today.
Before you leave, I know you write for the Philadelphia Citizen, is it?
Yep.
Right. And so, and one of the pieces that I saw, you talked about, well, I can't leave. You're another Black man on the panel, so I want to talk about us as Black men, and our dreams, and what you could leave us. I know most of our audience is women. They say, "Why are you talking about brothers all the time?" Because I'm a brother, and I need to uplift the brothers, because we do need that wherever they are under the sound of our voice. And so this issue around mental health, this issue around, you wrote in the last piece that I saw, you talked about, you mentioned this earlier, you talked about gun violence in our communities and things of that nature. So leave us with, and you're in English, you're a wordsmith, right? You work with words. That's what you do.
That's correct.
I'm surprised when is your album coming out? When you gonna spit a little verse?
I could give an album of lectures. That's about it, brother.
Because but anyway, so give me a sense of where you think we are as Black men in particular, from your vantage point, and how do we leave a legacy of uplift for, and a tease for what people are gonna hear from next week.
So I've been on a journey for some years now, to identify and to develop a sense of masculinity for myself that is healthy, that's constructive, that is respectful of other people and of women, that is nonviolent, and that breaks away from the strictures of masculinity that have been handed down to us. And I've been on that journey for some time. I'm going to stay on that journey for the rest of my life. And I think the piece you're referring to, there was a moment for me around the whole Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, that made me feel a little bit outside of my own community of brothers, right? So the slap happens and there's all these conversations that occurred. And I felt like I'm on these different chats and these different lists and different threads with Black men. And I felt like the conversations that were going on in response to that were problematic and were limited. And so I wrote a piece about just my honest belief that I really believe that the way that we conceptualize masculinity is toxic for us. And I still believe that. And I got kicked out of a couple of group chats for that piece, right? And that's okay. But that was not enough, Brother Kilpatrick. So it's okay for me to raise the issue. Like, and I really still believe this, that toxic masculinity is really one of the central problems of our world. Wars come as a result for that. Homicide is a result for that, right? All the different challenges, domestic violence, right? Income inequality, a lot of things are because of the engines that drive patriarchy and masculinity, right? And that's why I want to break from that. But that wasn't enough for me to just raise that and lose a couple of friends here and there. So I started doing some digging to identify organizations that are working with Black men to wrestle with that. And I found an incredible organization in Philly called Black Men Heal, obviously founded by two Black women. But that's how it goes, bro.
Right.
More men can understand it. But bro, what they are doing is extraordinary. And they started off on a shoestring budget and built something that is started in Philly, but now it's in Virginia, it's in Baltimore, it's stretching out. And some of it's like therapeutic and traditional counseling, but some of it's just like they have this program called King's Corner, where just every Sunday you get on the Zoom and it's like a bunch of brothers from all over the country. They have a couple of facilitators and they just let brothers emote and express themselves and share their experiences. And it's such a moving, extraordinary experience to be in that kind of discourse with Black men, as opposed to the kinds of discourses that we're regularly in. And so again, like I'm on a journey, bro. And so sometimes, sometimes some of my close friends, they might not like what I have to say in response to things that they say, because I'm rejecting misogyny. I'm rejecting patriarchy, because those things have been toxic for me, and I think they've been toxic for Black men for a long time.
What's the number one thing you've learned on this journey about yourself and your own notions of masculinity and unlearning? And it's funny, I don't know if you know my background, but that's the work I do, is having conversations with men. Part of the work I do, and then in addition to this work, it's helping men understand.
Develop a segment for your show. Let's do something on a regular, because I feel like that work is really important.
Let's go. Let's do this, because I do this work. I mean, I work with men. I have conversations. I do a whole 12-man model. I want to know about this. What do you call it? I want to know about this Black Men Heal. So we're going to do this. So
it's at the Philadelphia Citizen. If you just put my name in, you'll see a bunch of, I'm a columnist here for a long time now. So right. A couple of years now. So you'll see a bunch of pieces come up, but there's I'll send you a link to the article on Black Men Heal, and the links are in there. So you can go to their site and see what they're doing. I mean, I hate to reduce it to the number one thing, right? Because there's like, literally, like, forget the 12-step program. It's a 1,200-step program. There's a lot of steps that's required. But I think for me, it was really the first things I have to do is check myself. I got to check my power, check my privilege. I got to check myself. Like is accountability for me. And that's hard sometimes, because especially as Black men, we don't always feel like we have power. We don't always feel like we have privilege, but there are some spaces in certain ways in which we do. And I think for me, I want to always be aware of that and check that, and always make sure that whatever power I have, I'm using that to support people who have less than what I have, right?
Sure.
So I think for me first it's about checking myself. I think some of the other elements to it though is self-discovery. It's seeking further knowledge always. Like I'm always reading and trying to learn more about them. I'm always reading more about gender and trying to figure out more about how I'm programmed and how to deprogram myself. And then I think there's a action item piece of this where, like, what are you going to do? And one of the things I support Black women. I support them in every way that I possibly can behind the scenes, right? Like I support a lot of Black women artists by buying their art, or I support a lot of women of color in different political ways by, consulting with them on campaigns, different things. No shine for me, don't want it. I just want to help myself understand the ways in which I can give back and be supportive and constructive in the world, as opposed to someone who's just trying to be dominant and take from the world.
Well, this work that this masculinity and healthy masculinity and unlearning the ways that we've contributed to an environment where violence and harm have occurred, all of that is the work that I do. So we will be talking again, my brother.
Let's go.
We're gonna do this. All right, but you get an opportunity to hear Dr. James Peterson August the 27th
Live.
at his baby keynote. His schedule, he's early, so y'all don't be fashionable. He you
Baby
got to
keynote
get
is
there.
early. The baby
Yeah.
keynote is
When
early.
I say early, I mean like out the door, like you need to be there registering at 8 o'clock to hear this brother.
Right.
And 8:30 is the conference. It's from 8:30 to 5, but he'll be right there in the beginning. So get there at 8 so you can make sure you hear this brother and what he has to say. MyDreamSummit.com is how you find out more and register and come to a great and fabulous event. Dr. James Peterson. How do people get a hold of you? You're on Twitter. You're on all
On
that
Twitter,
stuff.
you can find me at Dr. James Peterson on Twitter. That's probably the best way
Yeah.
to get to me. It's the only social media I kind of do on a regular basis. But yeah, hit me up there.
Inspiration for the nation. MyDreamSummit.com. Register now and hear the keynote, baby keynote from Dr. James Peterson, Inspiration for the Nation.